the Prince of Blossoming Dreams. Spring came softly to the Kingdom of Verdure, not with the fanfare of trumpets, but with the quiet hum of awakening life. Flowers unfurled their petals, streams sang beneath the thawing ice, and the winds carried the scent of fertile earth. Among these changes, Prince Idris was the kingdom's greatest herald of the season. His presence as radiant as sunlight breaking through the frost. Each year, the festival of spring's first bloom revolved around him. A prince so entwined with the rhythms of nature that his laughter seemed to coax the blossoms to life. But that spring, the laughter stopped. It was on the day of the festival, beneath the ancient magnolia tree at the heart of Verdure's great meadow, that the prince fell. The tree, its pale blooms cascading like starlight, had stood as a sentinel for centuries. A monument to the kingdom's resilience. It was here, during the height of celebration, that Idris had paused, his gaze drawn to the tree's highest boughs, his expression distant. "Do you hear it?" he had murmured to his sister, Princess Lyra, who stood at his side. Lyra frowned, her heart stirred by his tone, soft, almost reverent. "Hear what?" she asked, her voice touched with unease. But Idris did not answer. Instead, he reached out, as if grasping at something unseen, and collapsed into the soft carpet of wildflowers beneath the magnolia's shadow. The crowd's cheers turned to cries of alarm. Servants rushed forward, carrying the prince's limp form to the palace, where healers, sages, and seers worked tirelessly to wake him. In the days that followed, the kingdom grew quiet, its joy dimmed by uncertainty. Idris lay upon a bed of silk and lavender, his chest rising and falling in the rhythm of sleep. Yet no touch or voice could rouse him. His face, once alight with vitality, seemed carved from alabaster, unchanging and still. Lyra spent her days at his bedside, her heart burning with a mix of grief and determination. She was no stranger to struggle, having inherited her late mother's willfulness. While Idris had been the darling of the court, beloved for his gentleness and charm, Lyra was known for her sharp mind and relentless drive. It was she who had defended Verdure's borders during their father's illness. She who had negotiated peace with rival kingdoms. Yet now, faced with her brother's silent slumber, she felt powerless. By the third day, whispers began to ripple through the palace. Some claimed the prince had angered the gods by trespassing too close to the magnolia, a sacred tree tied to ancient rites. Others suggested he had been cursed by jealous spirits of the season, envious of his radiance. Lyra dismissed these superstitions, yet doubt gnawed at the edges of her resolve. On the seventh night, she stood alone in the palace gardens, the cool spring air heavy with the scent of jasmine. Her gaze lifted to the stars, their light sharp against the inky sky. Her thoughts churned like restless waters, seeking a path forward. You look for answers where the stars cannot guide you, came a voice from the shadows. Lyra spun, her hand instinctively gripping the hilt of her dagger. Emerging from the darkness was a figure cloaked in grey, their face obscured by a veil of silken threads. "I am but a messenger," the figure continued, their voice neither male nor female, but something ageless and otherworldly. "Your brother's slumber is not of this world. To wake him, you must seek the Spring Witch." The name fell like a stone into Lyra's mind, its weight unsettling. She had heard whispers of the Spring Witch in childhood tales, a figure shrouded in mystery and contradiction. Some said she was a guardian of life, others a harbinger of doom. All agreed on one thing: she held sway over the season itself. "Where can I find her?" Lyra demanded, stepping closer, her voice sharp with urgency. The messenger pointed to the horizon, where the dense line of the Eververdant Forest loomed against the night. "Her sanctuary lies deep within the forest, where the mortal world dissolves into dreams. But beware, princess. The path is fraught with trials, and the witch does not give her secrets freely." With that, the figure melted into the shadows, leaving Lyra alone beneath the stars. By dawn, Lyra had made her decision. She donned a cloak of midnight blue and strapped her sword to her side. Standing in the great hall of the palace, she addressed the court with a voice that brooked no argument. "I will find the Spring Witch and bring my brother back," she declared, her gaze steady. "Do not wait for me, and do not follow. This is a path I must walk alone." And so, as the first light of day kissed the earth, Lyra set forth, her heart heavy with fear, yet alight with determination. The magnolia tree watched her go, its blossoms trembling in the morning breeze, as if whispering a secret she had yet to learn. The Eververdant Forest stretched like a slumbering beast across the horizon, its edges bathed in a perpetual twilight. Princess Lyra approached its borders with cautious determination, the whispers of ancient tales circling her thoughts. This was no ordinary forest. It was said that the air within shifted with the seasons, bending reality to its will. Those who entered unprepared often emerged changed, or never emerged at all. As she stepped beneath the forest canopy, the world shifted. The daylight dimmed, replaced by a diffused glow that seemed to emanate from the trees themselves. Their trunks were impossibly tall, their leaves shimmering with hues that defied description, as though the forest breathed in colors not meant for mortal eyes. The silence was unnerving. It was not the quiet of stillness, but a heavy absence, as if the forest were holding its breath, watching her every step. Lyra tightened her grip on her sword, her fingers brushing the hilt for reassurance. For hours, or perhaps days, she walked. Time in the Eververdant Forest moved strangely, its passage impossible to gauge. At first, Lyra relied on her instincts, forging a path through the dense undergrowth. But as the terrain grew more treacherous, the forest began to resist her. Vines coiled around her ankles, shadows flickered at the edges of her vision, and whispers, not of mortals, but of the trees themselves, rose and fell like a distant tide. "Turn back," they seemed to murmur. "This is not your place." Lyra ignored them. She pressed forward, her resolve unyielding. Yet, as the hours stretched on, the weight of the forest began to seep into her bones. Her breath grew labored, her thoughts clouded by fatigue. Was she walking in circles? Was this all some cruel enchantment meant to ensnare her? It was then, at the height of her despair, that she saw it. A flicker of light in the distance, faint but unmistakable. She quickened her pace, weaving through the trees, her heart pounding with a mix of hope and trepidation. The light led her to a clearing, unlike any she had seen before. At its center stood a dwelling, if it could be called that. It seemed alive, its walls formed from interwoven branches, its roof a cascade of petals that shifted in color with every breath of wind. The air here was thick, with the scent of blossoms and the hum of unseen energy. Before Lyra could step closer, the figure emerged. The spring witch. She moved as though she were part of the forest. Her robes a living tapestry of flowers and leaves that shifted and bloomed with her every movement. Her face was obscured by a veil of translucent petals, and her eyes, when Lyra dared to meet them, were an unsettling blend of gold and green, like sunlight filtering through the forest canopy. "You are far from home, Princess Lyra," the witch said, her voice as soft and cold as dew on a winter's morning. "I've come to ask for your help," Lyra replied, her voice steady despite the unease that gripped her. "My brother, Prince Idris, has fallen into an enchanted sleep. They say you hold the power to awaken him." The witch tilted her head, studying Lyra with an inscrutable expression. "And what would you give to see him wake?" "Whatever it takes," Lyra said without hesitation. At this, the witch let out a soft, mirthless laugh. "Bold words, child. But power does not come without cost. The curse upon your brother is woven into the fabric of spring itself. To break it, you must retrieve the heart of the first blossom, hidden deep within the Labyrinth of Seasons." Lyra's brow furrowed. "The Labyrinth of Seasons? What is that?" The witch stepped closer, her presence both alluring and unsettling. "A place beyond time, where the seasons are born and die. The path to the labyrinth lies through the forest. But be warned, it is not a journey for the faint of heart. Each season will test you, forcing you to confront truths you would rather forget. Only those who can bear the weight of their own soul can claim the heart. And if I succeed, then your brother will awaken," the witch said simply. "But the labyrinth's gifts are never without consequence. To bring life, something must be given in return." The words hung in the air, their meaning unclear but ominous. Lyra's determination did not falter. "I'll do whatever it takes," she said again, her voice firm. The witch nodded, though her expression remained unreadable. "Very well. The path to the labyrinth begins at the ancient oak. Seek the door carved into its bark and step through. Beyond lies your trial." With that, the witch turned, her form dissolving into petals that scattered on the wind. The clearing fell silent once more, the weight of the witch's words pressing upon Lyra like a heavy cloak. She turned back toward the forest, her path clear yet shrouded in mystery. As the light of the clearing faded behind her, she whispered a silent promise to her sleeping brother. "I will bring you back, no matter what it takes." The trees seemed to sigh in response, their branches swaying as though stirred by unseen forces. Lyra walked on, her heart steeled for the trials to come. The ancient oak rose before Lyra like a sentinel of time, its gnarled roots twisting into the earth and its bark marked with deep furrows. At its center, a door carved with intricate runes shimmered faintly, as though alive. The air around it was thick with expectation, every rustle of leaves and sigh of wind carrying a sense of foreboding. Lyra hesitated for a moment, her hand hovering over the worn wood. The spring witch's warning echoed in her mind. Each season will test you, forcing you to confront truths you would rather forget. But her resolve did not waver. With a steady breath, she pushed the door open and stepped through. The first season engulfed her like a sudden storm. Winter, cold and sharp. Snowflakes hung frozen in midair, catching the faint light and refracting it like shattered glass. The ground beneath her was slick with ice, and the trees stood skeletal and unyielding, their branches clawing at the sky. A voice, distant and mournful, whispered through the frozen air. "What do you seek, wanderer of the seasons?" Lyra straightened, her breath clouding before her. "The heart of the first blossom." The voice chuckled, a brittle sound like ice cracking. "And what do you fear, daughter of verdure?" She froze, her mind instinctively shielding itself. The whisper grew louder, closer, and the air around her thickened. Before she could respond, the snow coalesced into a figure, a mirror image of herself, but pale and cold, her eyes lifeless. "I fear nothing," Lyra said firmly. "Lies," the apparition hissed, its voice sharp as frostbite. "You fear being forgotten, abandoned just as your brother's light outshines your own." Lyra's heart clenched, but she stood firm. "I will not deny the shadows within me, but they do not rule me. My brother is my light, and I will not lose him." The apparition dissolved, the snow falling in a gentle cascade. The voice receded, leaving behind a path of thawing ice. Lyra pressed forward, her steps steady despite the lingering chill. As she emerged, the air around her grew heavy and hot. She had entered summer, a world of unrelenting sun and golden haze. Fields of wheat stretched endlessly, their tips brushing against the sky while the air buzzed with the relentless hum of cicadas. Sweat beaded on her brow, and each step felt like wading through invisible flames. "Here," the voice returned, warmer but no less insidious. "What burdens do you carry, Princess of Verdure?" Lyra clenched her jaw, her eyes scanning the horizon. "I carry duty. I carry the weight of my people's hopes." The golden haze thickened, swirling around her until it formed a towering figure, a shadow with glowing ember eyes. It loomed over her, its heat searing. "Duty is a heavy chain, is it not? A chain that binds you, that suffocates your will." The figure stretched out its hand, molten and radiant. "Cast it away. Free yourself from the need to save him. Save yourself." "No," Lyra said, her voice strong despite the oppressive heat. "My duty is my strength, not my chain. I will carry it willingly, for it is what makes me who I am." The figure let out a roar, its flames flaring, but as Lyra stepped forward, it crumbled into ash. The heat receded, replaced by the cool breeze of autumn. The third season was twilight eternal. The trees here were ablaze with crimson and gold, their leaves falling in an endless, soundless cascade. The air smelled of earth and decay, sweet and melancholic. Lyra walked carefully, the soft crunch of leaves beneath her feet, the only sound. This place felt different, heavier. The voice returned, softer now, almost mournful. "What will you sacrifice, Lyra of Verdure?" The question stopped her in her tracks. The trees around her seemed to lean closer, their branches whispering secrets she could not understand. At the center of the grove stood a pedestal, and upon it, a faintly glowing blossom. But before she could reach it, another figure stepped out from the shadows. This time, it was not a twisted reflection or a looming shadow. It was her brother, Idris, his face pale and drawn, his eyes brimming with sorrow. "Will you sacrifice me?" he asked, his voice fragile. Lyra's breath caught. "Number I would never." "And yet," Idris said, stepping closer, "to give life, something must be taken. Do you truly understand what you are willing to pay?" Lyra's heart ached. She stepped forward, placing her hand on her brother's. "I will bear the cost, whatever it may be. I would rather carry the burden of sacrifice than the weight of regret." The vision of Idris smiled, faint and fleeting, before dissolving into a swirl of autumn leaves. The path to the pedestal cleared, and Lyra approached, her steps sure. She took the glowing blossom in her hands, its warmth radiating through her. The seasons around her collapsed into a whirl of light and color, and the labyrinth dissolved. When she opened her eyes, she was back in the Eververdant Forest, the heart of the first blossom resting delicately in her palms. The forest was silent, the air expectant. Lyra felt a weight settle over her, not the weight of despair, but the profound stillness of choice. The trials were over, but the true test was yet to come. Lyra returned to the clearing where the spring witch awaited. Her journey through the Labyrinth of Seasons etched into her soul. The forest seemed quieter now, as if it, too, was holding its breath. The heart of the first blossom glowed faintly in her hands, a delicate yet powerful light that pulsed with each beat of her heart. The spring witch emerged from the shadows, her form flowing like water, her face still veiled in petals. The sight of the blossom in Lyra's hands brought no smile to her enigmatic face. Instead, she tilted her head as though inspecting the princess's very essence. "You have done what few could," the witch said, her voice soft but heavy with meaning. "The heart of the first blossom is yours to wield. But before you decide its fate, you must understand the price of your choice." "I have already accepted the cost," Lyra replied, her voice steady, though her hands trembled faintly under the blossom's weight. "Have you?" The witch's gaze sharpened, though her eyes remained unreadable. "Tell me, Princess Lyra, what do you know of the tree under which your brother sleeps?" Lyra blinked, caught off guard. "Only that it is ancient and sacred. The seers say it has stood for centuries, watching over the kingdom." The witch gave a soft laugh, a sound that held neither joy nor mockery, but something deeper, more elusive. "The magnolia is no mere tree. It was once a soul, as human as you or I, cursed to bloom eternally, but never truly thrive. Do you wish to know why?" Lyra nodded, though the weight of the witch's words settled uneasily on her shoulders. "The magnolia's curse is born of love," the witch began, her voice weaving a tale as ancient as the tree itself. "Long ago, in a time before your kingdom was born, there was a young woman whose heart was bound to the spirit of winter. Their love was a fragile thing, doomed from the start, for she belonged to the realm of spring, and he to the cold, unyielding frost." The clearing seemed to dim as the witch spoke, the air thick with the echoes of forgotten sorrow. When the woman sought to escape the bonds of her season, she was punished by the spring court. Her spirit was trapped within the magnolia tree, condemned to bloom eternally as a symbol of spring's triumph over the other seasons. Her love, the spirit of winter, could only watch from afar, unable to reach her. Lyra's breath hitched. "And what does this have to do with Idris?" "The curse was never truly dormant," the witch replied, her voice tinged with a sorrowful edge. "Your brother, with his vibrant life force, unknowingly awakened the sorrow buried deep within the magnolia's roots. Her grief took hold of him, pulling him into her dream of eternal sleep. She seeks solace, and he has become her unwitting vessel." The word struck Lyra like a blade. She clutched the heart of the first blossom tighter, her mind reeling. "Then this blossom, will it free her?" The witch's gaze turned solemn. "The blossom holds the power to break the curse. Yes, but to do so, it must be planted in the magnolia's roots. The tree will wither, its spirit released from its eternal torment. Your brother will awaken, but in doing so, the magnolia's life will end. Lyra's heart twisted. The magnolia, for all its beauty, was no longer just a tree in her eyes. It was a soul, bound by sorrow yet enduring, a silent witness to the kingdom's history. And yet, Idris? What if I don't use the blossom? She asked quietly. The witch's answer came without hesitation. Your brother will remain in his slumber, his soul entwined with the magnolia's dream. He will live, but only as part of her world. The blossom's power will fade, and both will be lost in time. Silence fell between them, the weight of the decision pressing down like the forest's shadows. Lyra's thoughts churned, her memories of Idris filling her mind. His laughter, his kindness, the way his presence brought light to everyone around him. But beneath it all, she felt the sorrow of the magnolia, a soul that had suffered silently for centuries. I need a moment, she whispered, turning away to the edge of the clearing. As she stood there, staring at the heart of the first blossom, Lyra felt the enormity of her choice. To save Idris meant condemning the magnolia to oblivion. To save the magnolia meant losing her brother forever. The stars began to emerge in the twilight sky, their faint light dappling the forest floor. Lyra closed her eyes, her hand tightening around the blossom. I will not sacrifice my brother, she murmured, her voice resolute. But I will not forget the magnolia's sacrifice either. With that, she turned back to the witch, her decision made, though her heart ached with the weight of it. The witch nodded, as though she had known the choice all along. Then let it be done, the witch said softly. The forest seemed to sigh, its ancient breath rustling the leaves as Lyra prepared for what must come. The first light of dawn filtered through the Eververdant Forest, casting long golden rays upon the clearing where Lyra stood. The heart of the first blossom glowed in her hands, pulsing faintly, as though aware of the weight of its purpose. The spring witch stepped forward, her presence as quiet and inevitable as the turning of the seasons. The magnolia waits, she murmured, her voice like the rustle of leaves in a gentle breeze. Lyra nodded, her resolve unbroken, despite the ache in her chest. Together, they walked back through the forest, the trees parting as if acknowledging the gravity of their task. The path was both unfamiliar and intimate, as if Lyra's every step was guided by the forest's will. When they emerged into the meadow, the magnolia stood as it always had, its blossoms glowing faintly in the early light. Beneath its ancient boughs, Idris lay as though carved from marble, his expression peaceful, untouched by the passage of days. The sight sent a fresh wave of determination through Lyra, even as the sorrow of her choice coiled around her heart. The witch gestured to the base of the tree, where the roots twisted together like clasped hands. Place the blossom there. It will take root and undo what has been done. Lyra approached the tree slowly, every step measured, as though each moment deserved to be savored. She knelt beside the roots, brushing her hand over the soil. It was warm, alive, vibrating faintly with the energy of the magnolia's imprisoned spirit. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I wish there were another way." For a moment, she thought she felt the tree respond. A faint pulse, a quiet acknowledgement of her words. Steeling herself, Lyra placed the heart of the first blossom into the soil and covered it gently with earth. The effect was immediate. The ground trembled softly, and the magnolia's blossoms began to fall, one by one, as though weeping. The air grew heavy with their scent, sweet and melancholic. The light around the tree shifted, turning golden and ethereal, and Lyra thought she heard the faint sound of a song, soft, mournful, and beautiful. The witch stepped back, her hands folded before her. "The magnolia spirit is leaving. It will find peace now." Lyra watched as the tree began to wither, its once vibrant leaves curling and falling to the ground. The golden light enveloped Idris, and his chest rose with a deep, shuddering breath. His eyes fluttered open, confusion giving way to recognition as they met Lyra's tear-filled gaze. "Lyra," he murmured, his voice weak but unmistakable. She fell to her knees beside him, her hands clutching his. "Idris, you're awake." His brow furrowed slightly as he glanced around, noticing the fading light of the magnolia and the scattered petals around him. "What happened? The tree. I remember." "Shh," Lyra whispered, squeezing his hands. "You're safe now. That's all that matters." The spring witch stepped forward, her voice calm yet tinged with finality. "The magnolia has returned to the cycle, and with it, the curse is undone. But its memory will linger in you, Idris. You carry a part of its spirit now, its dreams and its sorrows." Idris looked up at the witch, his expression solemn. "I felt it. While I was asleep, I saw its dreams, its longing." He glanced back at Lyra, his eyes filled with gratitude and sadness. "You did this for me. What did it cost?" Lyra shook her head, tears streaking her cheeks. "It doesn't matter. You're here, Idris. That's all I care about." The meadow grew quiet as the last of the magnolia's light faded. Where the tree once stood, a patch of wildflowers began to sprout, vibrant and untamed, as if the earth itself sought to honor the magnolia's sacrifice. Idris and Lyra sat together, their hands clasped, the weight of their journey settling between them like an unspoken promise. The spring witch began to retreat, her form dissolving into a cascade of petals. Before she disappeared entirely, she turned to Lyra. "You have done what few could, Princess of Verdure. You chose life, but you did not forsake the memory of loss. That is the mark of a true guardian of spring." With that, she was gone, leaving the siblings alone in the meadow. In the days that followed, the kingdom rejoiced at Idris's return. Though Lyra spoke little of what had transpired, she often visited the meadow where the magnolia had stood, tending to the wildflowers that grew there. Idris joined her, his presence quieter now, as though the dreams of the magnolia still whispered in his heart. Spring continued, bittersweet but enduring. The magnolia's sacrifice was not forgotten, its story etched into the hearts of those who had been touched by its sorrow and beauty. And as the seasons turned, Lyra and Idris carried its memory forward, a reminder that even in loss, there is the seed of renewal, and in renewal, the echoes of love.